All right. So, welcome to our team call. I am super, super excited. We have Sal Schittino joining us. Did I pronounce that right?
Skitty.
Katina.
Schittino. Joining us tonight. Sal is an LCPC, a psychotherapist, and a success and growth consultant. So I am just going to let him take it away. I am super excited to hear what he has to say. He's going to be talking about how to create a growth-oriented mindset, which in our business, we all can use more of. So I'm going to mute myself and take it away, Sal.
Perfect. Thank you, Sharon. And thank you, Anna, for this opportunity. That's my big sis right there. One of my role models in life. Embarrass her a little bit. All right, guys. So, yes, like Sarah was saying, my name is Sal Schittino. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and success and growth consultant at a private practice in Millsville and Catonsville, Maryland. So before I get into any details, I want to throw just a couple of questions out to you. I want you to get your thoughts turning in this direction because it's going to help us kind of mold the direction of our talk for tonight. So the first question is, who here has had a setback where it made you question the decision that you made? Okay, you can put your hands up. That's helpful for me. Okay, good. So who here has made a mistake or had a misfortune to the extent that you question your ability? Asking yourself, am I competent? Am I worthy? Yes. Okay, yeah. Questioning your capability, essentially. And lastly, who here has had a failure or trauma to the extent that you question your sense of self, your identity? Who am I? Do I have self-worth? Yeah, I did. Yeah. Am I good enough? That's a big one that pops up. Okay, so during my talk, I want you to think about those kinds of things that came up because those fall under the paradigm of self-limiting beliefs. And that's something that we're going to learn how to challenge tonight. We're going to learn how to examine them, challenge them, name them, and then replace them. That's a big part of the growth mindset because in order to grow, we've got to identify what's causing stagnation, what's allowing us or keeping us from moving forward. All right. So what I do with my clients as a therapist, I specialize in trauma and adjustment disorders. So what that means is I help people transition and pivot from a victim mindset, from stagnation to growth and resiliency, learning how to basically build the foundation of their life to work towards the goals that they want and the vision in which they've been creating for themselves or their business or whatever kind of scope or facet of life, whether it's relationships, career, what have you. But allowing you to take that vision, take that picture that you have in mind of yourself for the future and start creating manageable and applicable steps moving forward. So the three things that are what I've come to learn that are most vital in creating that growth mindset, in which I'm going to pull from tenets of cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy, are threefold. So the first one is making sure that we have skills and strategies to deal with those high emotional states, right? When your emotionality goes through the roof and you become highly stressed and you're activating your fight or flight response, your norepinephrine, noradrenaline is just rushing through your veins and your brain and body aren't able to stay grounded in the moment. So I want to give you some tangible strategies and techniques to figure out how to manage that, how to cope with it, and how to develop a better means of transitional ways and periods moving forward. Next is how to overcome hindering or disempowering beliefs about yourself or your environment. Right? The belief system is what paints the window to the world outside of us. It's our infrastructure. It's the system in which is going to basically make the decisions for us without us making a decision actively. Right? Not many people know that before we make a decision, science tells us we make it 7 minutes before we actively make that decision, because your unconscious thought is going 1,000 miles through the brain. Your conscious thought is 100 miles an hour. So therefore, what's deep in the unconscious and subconscious brain is really what is dictating our decisions, our actions, and our interpretations and perceptions of the world. And lastly, I want to talk about how to turn rejection and failure into resiliency and growth. Because a lot of times, especially in, I presume, your guys' line of work, where you are your boss and you have to go out there and crew your own clients, you're probably going to get told no a lot. You're probably going to be met with, I can't use your services right now, right? And people are going to continually give us this feedback that maybe what we're doing right now isn't applicable to them. And then that translates to our brain that we're a failure, that we did something wrong. So we want to make sure that we got strategies in those moments that are not going to keep us from basically having that as our consistent belief system moving forward, right? The means in which we are going to interpret our capability or our self-worth. So we want strategies in order to maneuver that, and we're going to talk about that. All right, so let's hop right into it. So I want to talk about ways of distress tolerance. I'm going to use tenets from cognitive behavioral therapy, mainly because it's been tested and it's been proven. And it's what I use with my clients. So these are for the people that come into my office and have no idea how to manage these high levels of stress. So if you are the type of person that gets in those moments of hyperarousal, right, when your anxiety really takes over, like public speaking, right? So it's the third greatest fear in all of the US. So a lot of people perceive it as something terrifying, mortifying to the brain. So we catastrophize it. We make it worse than it actually is. So we want to know how to maneuver through those situations. And when our brain is in those high stress states, we look at 3 avenues of exploration. We always do this. This is part of our reptilian brain. This is the brain that we've had for millions of years. So we want to know this information so that we know what's happening in the moment. Because emotion is something that we cannot control. It's how our brain and our body make sense of the world around us and tells us, okay, are we being rewarded or being threatened, and everything in between. So we've got to figure out a way to manage that in that time. So the threefold kind of navigational path that the brain takes is it looks at 1, responsibility and effectiveness, saying this is my fault, kind of taking that personal blame onto yourself. I did something wrong. I should have done something better, right? Next one is safety and vulnerability, asking yourself, am I safe in my environment? Am I in danger? Am I being threatened in some way, form, or fashion? And the last one is control and power, right? If those questions of, do I have control? Do I feel powerless? Am I helpless? Am I hopeless in this current situation? And that is what your brain is assessing in that moment. It's basically that very much what I just said, the assessment of how to make an appropriate decision in the moment. But we need to know that, because that's the first line of defense that your brain is going to go through in order to find out what's the next decision or move to make. All right, so I'm going to go off of an acronym known as Improve the Moment. And when I'm doing this, I want you to think about the last time that you felt really stressed out, or felt really anxious, or had a strong response to what someone said, or kind of like the impression someone gave you. But put yourself back into that memory and that image while I'm going through these steps and bullet points. So the acronym that I'm using is Improve the Moment. So Improve is the acronym, and Improve the Moment is the phrase, the association that I want you to use in these times. So what this is going to allow you to do is calm down the body. So your physiology is going to be the first thing that responds in these moments of high stress. So that's where we're going to start our work. So so the first letter of Improve is imagery. Imagery, right? That's painting the environment around us, painting the window to that environment, and it's giving us the perception of what's happening. And as we all know, perception is reality, not necessarily what's actually happening, but just how our brain is interpreting it. So when we're creating this picture, what we want to do first is we want to ground ourselves by painting a different picture and changing our attention and focus by noticing our senses, right? What are you smelling? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you feeling? That's going to downregulate your central nervous system, and it's going to allow you to be more mindful as to what's in front of you and what's currently happening. Because our brain, when it gets in those high stress environments and situations, it's going to catapult us to this fantastical way of thinking. And when you get there, it's harder to come back, right? And then we start convincing ourselves that there's something massively we're doing wrong, right? And then it just kind of extrapolates on that thought and theory of helplessness. All right, so next is the meaning in which we pull from the situation. So the meaning is what's going to dictate your perception, the way you interpret a situation. So we've got to make sure that meaning, that interpretation that we're pulling from the situation is of benefit, right? If we are just hyper-focusing on whatever mistake we made or what someone said, what happens is our brain is only going to devote its resources there. And our brain cannot use two parts of it can't activate two parts or two axes of the brain at the same time. It's just not possible. Science has told us that this time and time again. So what happens is we use 100% of the brain throughout the day, right? Debunk that theory that we only use 10%, but in a moment's notice, we only use 10%. And that's actually a good thing because it keeps us from becoming overwhelmed and thinking about too many things in the moment. So come back to the topic right now, the point, and that's the meaning, right? What's the meaning that you're pulling from? What is most important to think about in those moments? Next is prayer. Now, when I say prayer, it doesn't mean you have to believe in God. What it means is that when we have a connection with something outside of us, something greater than us, it allows us to feel supported when maybe we don't know how to support ourselves in that moment. And it also creates a mantra in the brain. So it's going to change your directional thought, focus, and pattern in that moment to something that's more grounding, something that's comforting, something that's empowering. So it allows us to take a step back and detach a little bit from that moment, because that's what we really need to do. With emotions and feelings, it's not about changing them or distracting them. It's about finding a way to ride it out, right? I use a tactic with my clients called urge surfing. It's noticing the feeling and allowing it to run its course, right? Again, science tells us it's only going to last 10 to 15 minutes because that's how long it takes for the reuptake of adrenaline in our body. So it's not going to extend any further than that. And if it does extend further than that, then that means it's more on the cognitive level than anything. And your body and brain are just working in tandem at that point. So next are relaxation. Now, this does not mean scrolling through your phone, because what happens when you're just scrolling through your phone is you fixate your brain and you're not allowing yourself to actually take a step back. You're still stimulating your brain. And when you're still stimulating the brain has no time to disengage or separate. So it's still activating, it's still using its energy resources, and it's depleting itself, right? Because the brain takes up 20% of our electrical energy of the body, 20%. So if you, bless you, Sarah, if you are getting caught up, if you're getting so caught up in the emotional response in the moment, it's going to deplete your resources by activating all those thought processes in the brain that are attached to said emotion. So we've got to be cognizant of that and be able to take a step back. Okay. Relaxation. There are techniques for relaxation. I always start with breathing. And the little tactic that I give every client is make sure that you breathe in for fewer seconds than you breathe out. So I do the 4, hold for 2, and exhale for 5. So what that does is it massages your parasympathetic nervous system. And I'm sure you guys all know this, but it's releasing this chemical called acetylcholine. And what that helps our brain to do is focus in the moment as to what is most beneficial. So it allows us to kind of hyper focus on something that is more beneficial. So it doesn't kind of take our thoughts and our bodily responses in all these different directions. It allows us to ground and focus. So it's very important that we implement breathing techniques, because it also allows us to disengage and downregulate that central nervous system for ourselves, right? Also, drinking something warm. A warm beverage is monumental in changing our mood in the moment. There was a cool little scientific study that was done about 15 years ago, right? And they had one set of subjects have a warm beverage after said task that they had to do, and then the other ones they didn't. And then they compared and contrasted how they thought about the subjectors, right? The people that were giving the experiment, and the ones that drank the warm cup of whatever, tea or coffee, are the ones that they felt that the person was more comforting and welcoming. It's because they were relaxed. It's because they were at ease and their central nervous system was calmed down. So it's very useful. Also, like taking a bath, just getting away from the situation is going to be huge. Next, one thing at a time. This is huge for those who are doers, the ones that are trying to get a lot done in their day, that the ones that are ambitious and driven. The reason being is because when the brain sees 15 things to do, it does what? Becomes overwhelmed, right? It gets so stressed out saying, I need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then you fill up your energy tank with those thoughts. And then what happens is it creates a belief that it's going to be exhausting, it's going to be too stressful, and then you engage in learned helplessness, saying, I can't do anything about it, so why not just give up? That's why I want to focus on one thing at a time. You know, like the other day, last week, I had 12 clients. It was the most clients I ever had in a day, and I was really proud of that. I was pumped about it. But there was one moment where I decided to look at all 12 names. And in that very second, my body started to respond, heart rate went up, I started getting frustrated and irritated, and it took me out of my rhythm. So I had to reframe. I had to take a step back and say, okay, what can I do next? It's going to be just seeing this one client and doing and giving the best therapeutic intervention and modality that I possibly can in that time. And the brain's like, okay, I can do that one thing. And I'm sure many of you have probably heard of the PREMAC principle. That basically stipulates that if you tell your brain that you're going to do one thing in a lot amount of time, 15 minutes is the happy number, then the brain says, I can do that. I can do one thing that's manageable, it's doable. And then what you do is you reward that. You get a little bit of dopamine trip, which is your reward chemical. And then your brain says, I want to keep doing that thing over and over and over again. And then you're creating this like habit and ritual of being excited after you do these small steps. So that's why it's so important, right? And also knowing that we're using 20% of the body's energy when we're using the brain. So you want to make sure you're devoting that attention and energy to something that makes sense for us in the moment. All right, so next we got vacation, right? This is the V part of improve, taking a vacation. And that doesn't mean you got to take some elaborate trip to Amalfi Coast or a cruise, nothing like that. It's basically moving the physical environment of the body, right? Getting the body out, going somewhere, getting it to relocate itself. Because once you do that, what you're basically communicating to the brain is that you're growing, you're progressing, you're moving forward. And there's a cool little kind of activation that happens in the brain. This is what I implement and use for my therapeutic intervention, which is through a technique called EMDR, where it creates a bilateral stimulation of the brain when you walk. So when you take that left step, right step, you're activating both parts of the hemisphere of the brain, so it creates a whole brain state. So the brain expedites the processing of an emotionally distressing situation, or like an argument you had with a loved one or your kids, something along those lines. It's going to speed up the processing, and it's going to allow you to disengage from whatever you're dealing with in the moment, right? Also, what falls under the paradigm of vacation is just getting out, going to a movie, maybe doing a little something for yourself, self-care, but moving your physical location is going to be monumental in those high stressful situations. Like for panic attacks, what I recommend for all my clients is to get outside, right? To kind of basically take a step back from that kind of claustrophobic sort of enclosing wall feeling, because it's just going to exacerbate your symptoms in that moment. Okay. And last one is encouragement. Now, a lot of us, the majority of us, we look for external means of encouragement, meaning loved ones, friends, family, what have you. The thing is, we can't rely on that. Yes, it's great when it happens. It's phenomenal. We love that. It's so engaging. You release oxytocin. It feels amazing. But the thing is, it's not a guarantee. So that's why I think it's more beneficial to create a system or a zone of compassion for ourselves. And where we want to start is, for one, accepting who we are. Just saying it is us, right? One thing that I ask my clients to always do is put themselves on a nice buffet. And we're going to look at the good, we're going to look at the bad, and everything in between. And we have the first state to ourselves that is just simply where we're beginning and who we are. Because in turn, that's going to open up any blockages that are keeping us from growing and moving forward. Because you're not having to have that battle with, this isn't who I am, or this is not what I believe about myself or my environment. It's just going to open up those gateways for ourselves. Right. All right, so now we're going to move on to how do we better manage the thought process? How do we become a more proficient thinker? And I'm going to use a strategy from cognitive behavioral therapy that has been just researched to no end, to the nth degree, and has been given proven results that 75% of clients that are given this technique are met with success, right? Depression is lowered by 25%. Anxiety is decimated by 72%. So when I start going through these steps, what I want you to do is I want you to identify a self-limiting belief about yourself. I want you to either write that down or have it in mind when I'm going through these steps. And I want you to apply it to each one for me. All right. So the first one, it's so the modality, the technique from the modality CBT is known as ABCDE method. So the A is our activating event. It's the who, what, where, when, and why. right? It's basically just the facts of what happened. That is the event. That's the situation. And then B is our belief. Now, a belief is something that we deem as truth and reality, right? Whether that truth and reality is self-serving or benefiting us, our loved ones, our environment, that's just simply how we're seeing the situation, right? It's going to be our interpretation and our perception. And that's what we dictate as reality. So we want to check that. We want to identify that. You really want to label that and be honest and genuine with what that is. All right, so next is our consequences. So the consequences are your emotions and your feelings. Whenever we have a situation that activates our stress response system, we're going to have an emotion, no matter what, no matter whether you want it or not. So it's paramount that we identify that. Because once you identify that, you don't become it. There's this misbelief and misconception that if you name your feelings, if you talk about them, you therefore become them, and you act in suit or in tandem with them. No, not the case at all. It actually creates a disengagement. And it tells you that I'm not my feeling. I'm just experiencing this feeling. Like I'm sure many of you have children, right? When your kid gets sad, he gets upset, he goes, I'm sad, I'm angry, right? I'm pissed off, I'm whatever. In that moment, we want to step in and say, let's change the language there. Use I feel as opposed to I am. Because I am, that activates your identity, right? Your sense of self, how you see your person, as opposed to I feel. It's just that's communicating the message that it's something we're just experiencing. Therefore, not who we are. We can disengage and take a step back. Next is D. You want to dispute this irrational belief, right? This strategy that I'm presenting right now, it's something that's going to allow you to basically challenge irrational belief systems. You're going to examine them, and then you're going to reframe them and place a more beneficial, empowering, motivating, right, growth-oriented belief about yourself, about your environment. It's going to be the way to get unstuck in those moments where your cognitive, repetitive, self-limiting beliefs are just pushing you down and putting that foot on your back, saying, don't get up. So disputing the irrational belief, I created an acronym known as HUMP, right? Getting over that hump. H stands for, and these are questions that I want you to ask yourself in these moments. It's going to be a bit of a checklist. So H is it helping or hurting? Just as simple as that. Is it helping or hurting your current situation, climate of things? U, is it useful? Does it provide utility? Right? Is it giving us some sort of resource that we can tap into that's going to help us maneuver and grow, or to basically take a step beyond this and become better because of it? Right? What's the utility there? Next is meaningful. Right? I'm gonna keep tapping into that word of meaning, because meaning is the interpretation that we pull from any situation. And if your meaning is something that on a consistent basis is holding you back, is causing stagnation, is creating self-hindering perception of you or your environment, then we've got to change that meaning that you pull from situations. Right? If you're getting yelled at by a coworker or a client, look at not what they're saying, but how they're saying it. It's going to evoke the feeling, and that's how we can make more sense of it, as opposed to just taking them at face value, the words they're saying. So we got to make sure that the meaning that we pull is something manageable, something controllable for us. It's going to be very, very useful in those moments. And lastly, perspective. What's the perspective that we're gaining here? Is it empowering? Is it optimistic? Is it creating a vigor within us that wants us to overcome setbacks, failures, mistakes? Or is it a perspective that basically is convincing us we can't do anything about it? We're helpless, we're hopeless. And then we start to blame others, we start to blame ourselves, personification of us, which is a cognitive distortion. So really what I'm saying here is we've got to be cognizant of these things, right? Because we have close to 70,000 thoughts a day. And 90% of those thoughts are repeated from the day before. So if you had a maladaptive belief system yesterday, odds are 90% chance it's going to continue today and the next day and the next day if we do not create a system and a strategy to challenge these things. So lastly is with that belief, with that irrational thought belief, we want to evaluate a new, more beneficial belief. And I have a little equation that you can use when this happens. We want to first change the way in which we see ourselves. right? Our brain operates off of two things in terms of how we communicate to it. And that's the visual cues, the images, and self-talk, language, what we're saying to our brain. So your vision, right? How do you see yourself? Better yet, how do you want to see yourself is what I want you to start thinking in the direction of. Next is self-talk. And the way in which I challenge this with anyone in my life, even my clients, is, hey, are you coming from the standpoint or the perspective of tyrant to slave? Because if you're doing that, what evolution tells us is that the slave is always going to rebel. And if you rebel, you're going to create learned helplessness, and you're just going to give up. And it's going to create stagnation. And when you are still and you're not moving in life, your brain will become depressed. That's the very definition of depressed. Stagnation, feeling stuck, right? So once you have that identified, you want to start shifting the way in which you talk to yourself by using, I like this little template, from employer to trusted employee. Because your trusted employee, you want the best for them. You want to encourage them. You want to support them, right? You want to be there in their tough times by giving them a voice of reason and understanding, and not just confusion and convoluted discussion and conversation. But you want to give them some tangible strategies and ways to maneuver through it, and supporting them and showing empathy for them. Empathy, right? Last month, Forbes magazine said that empathy is the most paramount, pertinent quality of anyone in a leadership position. And the reason being is because you allow someone to feel heard. You allow someone to feel understood. And there's nothing more connecting and bond-oriented than that. And then that's going to create a want and desire to work better for you. So why not create a want and desire within our brain for ourselves to work better for us? So once we have those two things laid out, the image plus with our self-talk, and then you put on a little bit of spice of effort, making sure that you're staying consistent with whatever skill set you're trying to put in place. And that is going to create your new belief about yourself and your environment. All right. So lastly, I want to talk about how we turn rejection, those no's, into growth and resiliency, and not a self-fulfilling prophecy or an inferiority complex. So how we want to start is, for one, like I've said before, and I'm going to repeat some of these bullet points because they are extremely pertinent in creating a belief in yourself and an understanding of how to move forward from things that are causing us to feel stuck. Is one, you want to accept loss. You want to accept the no. It's okay to accept the no. You can accept it by saying, instead of this being a kind of a condemnation that we put on ourselves, or demonization of ourselves, we want to say, next opportunity. How do we look forward from this? But what we have to do first is we've got to identify the feeling we're having and accepting the loss of the situation. Science tells us once you do that, once you identify and you're being realistic about that thing, then you open up that great way to change, like I said before. And where I pulled that little saying, that little quote from, is Carl Rogers. He was a psychologist in the early 60s, and he was the father of person-centered therapy. He was just an absolute monster and just driving force of therapeutic intervention during that time. And what he said verbatim was, the interesting paradox is that when I accept myself as I am fully, then I open up the gateway to change and growth. So be mindful of that, accepting yourself. Next is avoiding blame and personalizing. I think we all know this to an extent, but sometimes we need the reiteration of it. That when you blame others, you're devoiding yourself of responsibility. You're avoiding taking ownership of what you're going through, right? We can't control when someone says something to us or someone hurts us in a way. We just simply can't. We do not have that facility within our capability. But we do have the ability to take responsibility of our emotions, right? What is responsibility broken down to? Ability to respond. So first we want to say, that's what happened. And then you're looking at, what can I do differently moving forward, right? How do I control my ability to respond in the moment? Okay, and then personalizing, that's basically shaming yourself. And there's a difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is an identifier that we're doing something outside of our moral compass. That's good, it's useful. It's telling us we don't want to continue doing that because it's not who we are. It's not what we stand for. And then blame, right? Guilt and shame. That shame is what I just described. or I'm sorry, guilt is what I just described. So shame is basically saying you are the problem. Like with my nephews and his three boys, when they're doing something that is bad, what Anna always does in the moment is she makes sure that there's a differential between the boy and the behavior, saying what you did was wrong, but not you are wrong. Right? There's that differential. And that's paramount in these situations so we don't create those self-limiting belief systems. All right. So in building resiliency, first, what we want to do is we identify the takeaways, right? What's the lesson or message that we can pull from these distressing, distasteful moments where we felt like we were rejected or we were basically beaten down and we felt like we had no hope in these situations. If you take the lesson from it, what your brain is going to do is say, okay, there's a reason for that. And when you have a reason or a meaning for something, the brain can make use of it in a better fashion and a better orientation in moving forward in life. All right. Next is being open-minded. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with this concept, but why it's so useful when we are met with rejection or failure is because our brain fixates on whatever our emotion is telling us to think about. Like after a breakup, we think about how great the relationship is, right? How we lost this other person and how we're never going to find love again. But the point is not to devoid ourselves of the emotion or the belief that it's happening. It's the ability to take a step back and say, okay, what are other possibilities for myself in this moment, right? Seeing other solutions to said problem. Because what happens is our brain focuses on the problem, and it's because it's part of our survival mechanism in the brain, right? We were told and conditioned to always look for what's the problem or what's the issue or what's the threat in our environment so we can get the heck out of there for survival means. So that's our default. So once you're able to maneuver and cope with the default, right? Identifying the emotion, figuring out ways to calm down the body, then you can take a step back and see what you can do about the situation. But you got to know that sequence, right? And being able to see more possibilities for said problem. So taking that step back and seeing the big picture of things. Next, and this one's going to be key, and this is important for anyone that is ambitious and driven, because there's this misbelief and misnomer that if you engage in black and white thinking, you're somehow propelling yourself to success, saying I'm either perfect or I'm nothing at all. But see, this is a false conversation that we have with ourselves, because what's really happening is you're taking away power and control. We all have bad days. Life operates in the gray. That's just the fact. We cannot control perfection, but we can control maneuvering and strategies and different ways to look and perceive and function in different situations, right? So if you're able to see something on a spectrum, right, then you're able to say, okay, look, I had a bad day. I didn't sleep well, right? The kids kept me up, or the boys were fighting all day, and my mood's down. I'm feeling irritable. I'm feeling a little anxious and on edge. You give yourself permission to say that's okay. It's human. Because if you start telling yourself that you are bad or that you're not perfect because of it and you're therefore, not doing enough or you're a piece of crap, whatever you tell yourself, whatever that conversation looks like, then you're going to start to believe those things on a consistent basis, right? 90% of the thoughts from the day before are going to continue the day after. And that's 70,000 thoughts a day. That's why it's so important that we got to find a way to maneuver around these things and develop different strategies and techniques to change the way in which we see the world around us if it's not benefiting us. All right. And also, kind of playing off of that, you want to develop a zone of proximal distance when you are doing something different. And what a zone of proximal distance is, and this is a concept created by a psychologist in the early 1900s named Vygotsky, what he stipulates is that when you're trying to do something more, right, you're growing or you're pushing the envelope or you're extending yourself outside of your comfort zone, you want to make sure you do it within your capability. Right? You don't want to bite off more than you can chew. And the reason being is because, say we go into the gym and you want to squat 315 pounds right off the bat. If you do that, what's going to happen is you're more than likely going to hurt yourself and you're going to disenchant the idea of going to the gym and exercising. So you don't want to start there. You want to start with what you're able to do, right? Whether that's push-up, whether that's, an assisted push-up, what have you. Or, when it comes to squats, just figuring out the form, learning that much. Like putting your back up against the wall. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but putting your back up against the wall and learning how to squat, doing that supported squat. That's how you start building yourself. It's the same thing with building clients, right? If you have 10 clients this week, your goal for the next month should be 15 clients, and then building and building and building. I remember in the beginning of my therapeutic career and practice, I wanted 40 clients right off the bat, and that's all my brain was focusing on. I want 40, I want 40, I want 40. But I had no idea how to get 40. I just kept telling myself that because I thought if I was going to tell myself that it's going to happen, it's going to turn into fruition. It's good to have long-term goals, but it means nothing if you don't have things in your day-to-day that are going to allow you to create a trajectory in the direction of these goals. All right. So next, guys, and this is the last little bit, is going to create a mindset that you see rejection, setback, and failure as a necessary part of the equation of success. Right? Harvard Magazine says that we learn more from our failures than we do our successes. And the reason being is because we are more inclined to look at the failures with a closer lens. But that's a good thing. That's a good thing. We want to do that. But if you're able to depersonalize yourself from the situation and just seeing it for as it is, not worse than, then you give yourself power on how to basically perceive a different way to understand it. Saying, okay, look, I made this mistake, so I'm going to do this differently next time. And taking away the emotion in the conversation. Like, sure, you're feeling a certain way, but don't make that feeling a part of who you are, your infrastructure, or your sense of self. Now, we want to disengage from that language and that habituation. Next, we don't want to avoid failure ever, but we always want to avoid giving up. And this is something Mark Zuckerberg said. He said, you never want to maneuver in the direction that failure is not aligned with. But you simply want to learn how to deal with it better next time. That's going to be the real key, is what are the lessons and the messages you're taking moving forward. Of course, you've got to have the skill set in order to do that. Yes, have your skill set. But this is going to change the way in which you perceive that. So if you have a perceptual belief about a situation, about yourself, that's empowering, that's engaging, right, that's enchanting, then your skill set is going to be easier to follow because you're going to be engaging with your why. And that's going to touch on this last little bit that I'm going to share with you guys, is that whenever you feel devoid of motivation, ask yourself 3 questions. 1, can I do it? Right? Do you have the skill set, the strategy, the techniques to do said task? Because if you don't know how to lift a weight, then you're going to go into the gym and you're going to feel helpless and hopeless. Next is going to be, forgive me, next is, will it work, right? So this is the strategy. This is the game plan. What do you have in place? What's your regimen? Again, if you go to the gym, you don't have a regimen, your brain gets lost, it becomes aimless. And it says, I got no direction, I got no path, therefore I'm going to give up and I'm going to leave. And the last little bit, and this is going to be your anchoring piece, this is the most important part, is what are you doing it for? What is it worth? What's your why? Right? When you have a why, when it's stable, when it's grounded, then anything in your external environment, your circumstances, are not going to be able to penetrate that why if you have a firm belief about it. Right? Something that my sister and I had to go through about 6 years ago was an incident that I had experienced. It was a trauma, a huge setback, a huge stagnation in my life. And it made me believe that I was helpless, that I was broken, that I was devoid of belief in growth, that I was going to forever be this broken, fragile person. But I had to challenge that and I had to find a new why. So my why was going to be, I want to be greater than I could ever imagine. And once I planted that little seed in my mind, and I surrounded myself with people like Anna, and I'm sure you all as well, people that are going to empower you, that are going to support you, that are going to build you up, then what happens is that seed is going to germinate. And then if you're watering it properly each day and you're staying consistent about it, right? It's not about making these monumental leaps. It's about those little baby steps. We don't want to build the wall in one day, but we want to lay that one brick as perfectly and seamlessly as possible. All right, everyone, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk with you. And if there's any questions, please feel free.
That was awesome.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that.
Great job.
Thanks, sis.
Anybody have any questions?
Anything about like self-limiting beliefs, cognitive behavioral therapy, skills and strategies?
Cheryl, I know you got a question over there. Cheryl's our talker.
Okay.
You have two Cheryls on here.
I know, but you know who I'm talking to.
Oh, well, I'm not going to deny that Sarah's not wrong about that. I do love talking. But a lot of what you said, Sal, resonates with me. Number one, just because of how you started this whole conversation about things that set you back, and so there's just so much, like, you wouldn't even have the time of the day. So the most of, I know Sarah's like, God, I just opened you up and you're going to cry yourself to sleep tonight. But the children that I work with are a lot of behavioral traumatized children as well. And a lot of what you said resonates with me because I resonate with those children because of my past. So those cognitive thoughts and just streaming them all together, it was really good. It was good because I feel like sometimes I'm on a really good path, and then sometimes I'm like, I need a Sal in my life just to sit on my shoulder and, you know, be like, it's okay, it's okay. But I don't know if I have a question as much as I really have to say I really enjoyed what you had to say, because the self-limiting beliefs that I have about moving forward are always, am I good enough? Like I tell my children, I am, I can, I will, and I have them finish those very positive affirmations. But then again, as I say it, do I apply it to my own life?
But you're making me think of something. You're activating a thought of mine. Is the narrative in which our kids tell themselves, right? I mean, I'm not sure of what your children's ages are, but a lot of times they're
Elementary.
Elementary, okay. So they're going to perceive their sense of self off of their peer groups. It's how we build our identity in the beginning, because you share common interests, common understandings, and passions. And if we don't teach them at an early age how to kind of manipulate that narrative in their brain, right? What's the character that you play in your story? Are you the villain? Are you the bad guy? Are you the guy that's always making the mistakes? Are you always disempowering and disenchanting yourself? Or I love this little kind of antidote is, are you the hero to your narrative, to your story? Right? Are you the superhero? I use that with my younger age, kind of like middle childhood to adolescent kids, is how do you start becoming that hero in your narrative, in your story? And they say, okay, look, the hero, what would he do in this situation? Right? I'm getting bullied, or my friend's getting bullied. How do I stand up? Right? It's like my little nephew Sammy, right? If he sees my other nephew Christian, if he's getting bullied or if someone's messing with him, this dude will pick up a fire truck and he'll start charging this other kid. Because in his brain, he needs to be the protector. He sees a threat and he's going to manage that threat. Of course, we need to make sure that's happening in an adaptive format and position and strategy. But he's got the raw tenets that are really helpful in these situations.
Being a protector, that's again another thing that resonates. You know, I want to protect everybody, but you know, with this business, you also want to grow your business and not just continue to protect, but to flourish in that. And sometimes there are those self-limiting beliefs, and everything you said is like, I swear to you, you're sitting with me all day long. Like, you know, I have my kids, we are very dramatic. I am very dramatic, and I take my kids to that place. And I literally I've gotten tossed out of rooms for being too loud. Sarah, I know you have a hard time understanding that, but I'm not a wallflower anymore. This journey helped me become somebody I never was. And I like that, but I could do that for them. I feel like at times I withdraw and I put myself, even though I love what I do, sometimes I'm a little scared to go that extra step.
Definitely. And that's why I brought go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And that's why I brought up the concept of the zone of proximal distance. So proximal distance basically means making sure that you're staying within your framework of capability, when you're making these jumps, when you're challenging yourself, when you're pushing yourself to do more. Because if you're able to say, hey, I can make 5 phone calls today. Hey, I can send out 10 emails today. Your brain says, I can do those things. That's within my capability. Now, if you say, I need to send out 100 emails today, brain says, that's overwhelming. That's taxing. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to give up, learn helplessness. So it's making sure that we stay in that framework and we reward. I think it's so paramount that we reward ourselves for the baby steps. Because what you're doing is you're releasing the dopamine in the brain, the same thing that we get when we're scrolling through our phone. And you get those little droplets of good feeling. It's the thing that rewards us. And if you train your brain to do these things and you get excited about, like that, crossing off your to-do list, it goes, I like that feeling. I want more of that. And that's what you're going to do. But you're doing it in these small, little incremental steps. And guys, another thing that I learned, I think would be really helpful for you, because I think our professions overlap in terms of how we get clients and whatnot, is in the beginning, I was making these monster to-do lists. And it was really disempowering because I wouldn't get to everything. And then I'd be like, damn it, why didn't you get to all of that? You had it out, you knew you wanted to get it done, and you knew you needed to get done. What I realized, and actually what I learned from Simon Sinek, he's a public speaker as well, is that we want to schedule a time for the to-do list as opposed to just having the to-do list. Because the brain interprets it in different ways. If you just have 14 different things you need to do, the brain's not prioritizing them. It's just kind of saying, okay, I need to do that. But if you say, I got to do this Friday morning from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., brain goes, okay, got it. Check. I know when that's going to be done. And also, it releases the mental taxation and energy of having to think about it. But we can't rely on our memory. Everyone tries to rely on the memory. I have so many clients that say, yeah, I can remember it up here. I'm going to keep it in stored up in that steel trap. Bull crap. Don't rely on that ever, right? Unless it's something that you need to kind of communicate with a client, making sure you know that product or that tactic well. But otherwise, hey, let a planner or schedule do the job. Well, I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but thank you for listening.
Thank you very much.
And here, if I can ask, kind of open to everyone, is how do you guys get your clients? Like, what's the avenue or the resource where you get the most return on your effort in terms of clients?
Sarah?
Behind the scenes, building relationships, basically through social media.
Yeah, it's all through social media. What we do is we build relationships behind the scenes, and then you're familiar with Beachbody, their products, Salvi. Like all of it. So it's like networking behind the scenes, and then eventually we bring them into groups that we have on Facebook, and then they join and purchase stuff through Beachbody, things like that. And then when we get coaches, they go under us. And then when they get coaches, they go under them, and things like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I guess the strongest referral is the word of mouth.
Right.
Okay. But in the beginning, like onboarding them is showing the avenues that they can go through on social media, pretty much.
What?
Like social media, is that where you onboard them? Like, hey, look at this, see the resources,
You say waterboard?
Onboard.
Onboarding. Oh, where's your mind at? Belief system. Good.
Yeah. All right. I kept thinking you were saying that word, and I was like, what is he talking about?
Okay. So you guys are very similar to me. That's how I build my strongest referrals is word of mouth. Like, I know that good referral partners are like pediatricians, primary cares, and people just, working in like suicide awareness, mental health awareness. Those are going to be my strongest referral partners, but my best referral is going to be word of mouth. So I know I rely on that too heavily. And I don't know if this tactic could help for you guys, but it was really beneficial for me in the beginning to getting like my 45 clients in about 8 months. Was every conversation that I had of someone that's going to be basically an advocate for me, is I made sure my empathy was strong. I made sure I was always smiling. And I made sure that I made the conversation more about them than about me. People's favorite topic is themselves. And they'll engage with that. Because our professions, it's very personal. right? Your physical representation, your body image, it's so personal to people. And same thing with mental health. So we have a taboo. So I believe that it would behoove and work well for you guys in creating those lines of communication before anything, like really having that empathetic, welcoming, warm voice. All right. Anything else?
Anybody else have a comment or question while you got them?
Trying to give you guys all my strategies here. What else I got?
Megan, did you raise your hand? Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I almost didn't jump on tonight. Sarah was nice enough to invite a lot of us that are kind of on different teams, but we're all under the same big team.
Mm-hmm.
And I was having not so great feelings for the last couple of hours, just like down and questioning myself, and just one of those days. So I was like, I'm not going to take the time to get on the call. I'm just not in the mood. And you just completely given me the shift I needed tonight. So I just wanted to tell you I appreciate it, because it's just limiting beliefs. It's just getting stuck in our own negativity, comparisons, and not in a bad way. Like, I see everybody else's success, and it's so exciting because that's what we do. We root each other on, and we support each other, and we encourage each other. But then at the same time, you're like, what the heck on it? Why am I not doing the same things sometimes? And it's all on me. It's all on me. And I overwhelm myself when you were talking about like breaking things down and focusing on our own skill sets. Sometimes I think I try too hard to do what I see everybody else doing, but it might not be my thing. It might not be my strong point. And I need to kind of figure out where I fit with my own stuff. So this has been just what I needed tonight. So I just wanted to tell you I appreciated it.
Thank you for sharing, Megan, and thank you for getting on. You did the hard work, not me. So I appreciate that. And you're making me think of something that I think I forgot to touch on, is identifying our strengths and making sure that we're aware of that. I remember in the beginning of my career, I would always compare myself to my mentor, and he's this high intellectual kind of guy, right? He's always got the right answer. He's always got the evidence-based, modality in his back pocket. He just knows what to say. And I tried to be that. And that wasn't me. That wasn't my strength. My strength is people. It's interaction. It's talking. It's engaging. That's where I do my best work. And so I had to kind of humble myself, and I still had to identify what I was doing well. And one thing he would always tell me, and I feel like this would be useful for you right now, Megan, is that we're doing 1,000 things right. Of course, the setback or the failure is going to be just such an explosion in our cognitions, in our thinking, because it's what's paramount. It's what's giving us the strongest emotional response. But once we're able to take a step back, we want to notice the things that we're still doing well. Because I remember I was working like 70, 80 hours a week, and I only had 10 clients. I'm like, what am I doing? What is this for? Am I getting any kickback for this? And it was just staying consistent with those small things, but just staying consistent. That was the thing. Because I would, days would be like, all right, this is bull crap. I'm wasting my weekends here for what? I don't even have more than 20 clients in a week. That's, and that 20 is full time for a therapist. And I was just breaching 10. So it's very disenchanting. But I'm glad you hopped on. I really am. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the vulnerability. I think we need to hear that stuff. We're always kind of hiding behind this cloak of everything's great, especially on social media. And I know you guys operate on social media a lot. So it's like we create this facade that everything's perfect. We're doing everything right. Bull crap. Let's be real. Let's be open and honest, and also being honest about our strengths. So we're doing well. So yeah, good point. Good point. I feel like we don't talk about that enough. Man, this light is so hot. It's like right in my face. I just want to make sure you guys saw my face because I don't get lighting over here. But yeah, beside the point.
Anybody else? thank you so much for chatting with us and taking your time. I know I got a ton of notes out of this and a ton of nuggets, golden nuggets, and can't wait to go back and look at them tomorrow. Kind of let them soak in.
Good. Glad. And thank you guys for having me. I get off on this. I really appreciate being able to come into your space and just, share things about my space. I think this is, when you collaborate with people, I think that's when you kind of create a lot of growth, is when you're seeing how other people are maneuvering and what's working for them, and then different little tactics, strategies, because it's really all I'm giving is just these little tiny incremental strategies and techniques that we can use throughout the day. But it's all about remaining consistent with this. If you meditate for 2 minutes a day for 6 months, your brain will be 75% more happy just because of that 2 minutes a day. So it's like sometimes we just don't get that information because we're so flooded by all this kind of external stuff. So giving me the opportunity to share with you guys what works, in my office behind closed doors, it's very humbling. And I appreciate you guys giving me the platform to do so. Thank you. And thanks, Anna, for letting me be a part of this.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Yeah. Thank you. It was very good.
All right. Wonderful. Well, you guys have a great rest of your evening and take care.
You too. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thanks, Salvi.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.